This is Chris Goldthorpe, and I want to show you D4 players what to do with the England Gambit. For some reason, some strong players may be hoping to do a lot of videos, get a lot of views. I understand. Trust me, I'm not vilifying them. However, you should know that you can expect to encounter the England Gambit if you play D4 lately, because there are some traps to be avoided. However, I think if you simply avoid those traps and just don't play into black's hands, you can expect to get a reasonable advantage without having to have a lot of knowledge. So let's take a look at this, what I would consider mistaken opening, the England Gambit. As far as I'm concerned, it's like playing the Black Mardemer Gambit a tempo down without your queen pawn being out there. The Black Mardemer Gambit goes like this here, and this is, look, it's already negative. It's already better for black, and that's with this pawn already out and this bishop already free. So black is doing it here without the advantage of doing that. So it's no wonder that this is like plus 0.57. You can see what different engines say. If it says less than 1, you know, that's not necessarily very relevant to the practical results between two beginning players. However, this really doesn't have too much juice to it, this opening, if you know what I'm going to present here. So there are a couple of things you could do to completely throw this person off his game, because that's what he intended to do. You could play e4, and then when he goes here, all of a sudden this is your gambit. And if he takes, you don't even have to take here. You can go here. And then he might go here. And this is very much the opening that white wanted to play. Black doesn't get to play his goofy traps. In fact, he's the one who has to watch out. But it's not totally sound, I have to admit. Maybe no more sound than the England Gambit. And you certainly, you know, you don't have to play this bishop c4 line. You could take here, which is a little more sane. Computers always evaluate as if both players are going to play perfectly. So although this is a small negative, this is does well in practice. But you don't have to play this as a gambit. You could play the regular center game and do this. Now, besides that possibility, you can also turn this into a French defense where you're playing this as white a tempo up. You know, he doesn't have this pawn here. And there's no real downside to him committing to that because he can easily recover here. Or instead, you can make this like a Caro-Kann and play c3. Now, if you played knight f3, you're playing the Alekhine's defense like a tempo up if he goes here. Again, that's not really what I would recommend, but there are many things that you could do. If you know someone who plays this in blitz and you think they might play it in a tournament game against you, you might try some of those lesser alternatives and then save the best for when you're in an important game, which is to take the pawn. Now, you've probably seen some of the goofy videos that show the trap where white ends up in the trap, where he starts with the queen or the knight attacking the pawn. Usually if he plays one, he's going to play the other, so the move order in practice is not too important. Here, I actually believe bishop g5 is the better move. But this is playable. You know, it's a evaluation to it. But it tempts black to go here. And this move is actually playable. If he goes here, I think you'll find white's move. He does this, and he's going to get a fork here. But again, this is in the bishop f4 variation, so you don't need to remember this because I'm not recommending the bishop f4 variation. But also when he goes here, he does this. He could take the b pawn, and now as you can see, white has a clear advantage if he goes here. But the reason that black plays this is he hopes that you're going to go here. And then when he takes your pawn here, you can still have the advantage by playing knight to c3. Knight to c3 is white's ace in the hole in almost all these positions. However, this move looks good if you haven't seen this before. And as you can see, it's catastrophically bad. Now black goes here and black is winning. And most of the people who play this gambit, this is the only agenda that they have, is to get you into this goofy trap. Now there's like a chess academy where a grandmaster by the last name of Smirnov actually shows a more respectable way for black to play it. And that's what we're going to consider to be the main line, actually, is d6. However, the whole video shows how black can do well if you take here. And in fact, he can. It becomes a worthwhile gambit for black, who's a few tempo ahead on development and got both his bishops out, and he's got nothing to lose in the center, no pawns out there. So d6 is certainly playable by black, and I would consider this to be the main line. So let's first, we're going to come back to this, let's first look at what happens when he plays the more obvious way with queen here, knight here, and then knight here. And this will often happen with the opposite move order between these two moves. I don't think it's so important. However, this is definitely the move you want to do, and already the guys who are wanting to go here and attack your bishop and put you in check at the same time are already a little bit thrown off by this. But let's suppose, just because I'm sure you're going to be worried about it, what if he does the check? You don't need to think, oh no, he's going to get his pawn back. You don't always trap the queen here either, though you should certainly look for ways to do so. Knight c3 again is white's move, and if he takes the pawn, which really isn't even his best move with all engines, knight takes here. Knight a4 doesn't really trap the knight, even though on queen b4 check, white can play c3, and then the queen would guard his knight, and then the knight guards the pawn. But without this bishop uncovered here, it still doesn't trap the queen. So actually best for white is this move that looks a little bit like a retreating move. And if he tries this, which is the best that he's got, now you attack his queen. And some of the engines here actually show queen takes c3 to be his best. Very few people are going to do that. So the alternative is to do this, okay? And then you can do this. Now, according to a lot of engines, knight to d5 is actually even better with a threat to just take with the knight here. But this one works out pretty well. Go here. Okay, obviously he doesn't want to go here. He can't take the pawn. He can't go to these squares. He doesn't want to go back here and have you play e3 or e4. So this is the only move sensible to think about. Now this is White's main opportunity. And again, this is on the bishop g5 check situation where Black didn't have to make this checking move, which I don't believe is best for Black. So in fairness, we should come back and look at Black alternatives to queen b4 check at that point. Here the best he has is to take the knight, because if he takes and I hadn't seen this before. Yeah, better than rook takes a3, which you might want to take a moment to see why that's very strong. Even stronger is rook to b5, which is a more natural move. And then the queen pretty much must move here, lined up with this bishop. And then White can go here. And this queen is in a lot of trouble. A lot of trouble. So if we back up to the point where the bishop took at a3, and let's suppose he does something that makes a little bit more sense and takes, and then we'll take back, and White still has as many pawns as Black, but what he really has as an advantage is a tremendous advantage in development. Let's say the queen goes here, because there's not a lot of places that are safe for the queen to go if you look around. Now we go e3, which actually threatens to play rook here. And he might go here. And then you just retreat this guy. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to where Black played queen to b4 check. And his best move here is queen e6. Okay, so let's look at some of the alternatives first. Let's suppose that in this position he plays f6. That's moving something new and threatening something. Okay, then we're going to take here, obviously threatening the queen. He takes back. And now once again, knight c3 is always coming up. You're threatening knight d5 here. Moves the queen so that the knight is not pinned. Now you take. He takes back, and knight to d5 comes in again, because when the queen is moved from back here, c7 is unguarded. So the queen comes over here, saves itself, and guards c7, and then e4 is played. The knight is now double defended. And if knight e5, blockading, actually this move keeps the queen from going to b4 even if the knight does move. And if he tries to make your knight move, you're prepared to do that now. You can go here. There's no queen b4 check. And if he wants to trade, he's helping you dominate the center. And just looking at this, you would rather be the white pieces. Taking here and doubling White's pawns is certainly nothing that White dreads at this point. And as you can see, it's almost a full pawn better for White. So going down that path again, takes back, knight c3, avoiding the fork by knight d5, trades off to get the knight to d5. The queen's got to come over here, otherwise it goes back to d8. And now you guard the pawn, And if he goes here, then you do this. And now the knight has a good place to go. And that trade is very nice for white. And this trade is not really helping black. And black only does that so that he doesn't have to just move this knight and lose a tempo. Okay, so coming back to this point where we had just played the bishop move, this is where he got both of these in place, and we played bishop to g5. Okay, queen e6 was the main line, and we just looked at f6, and we looked at queen e6. Let's see what happens if he tries to check now. And this we just saw. You just go ahead and 3. If he takes here, then this bishop can come all the way back here. It's worth it to do that. If he goes here, then you can go ahead and attack the queen. If he moves the queen out of the way, which, I mean, if he gives up the queen for a rook and a knight, then I think that as the white pieces, you're not really concerned about beating that. You're comfortable with that. So that's why I'm mainly looking at the queen a3 line here. But if he does take here, I mean, obviously we're going to get this. And the knight's got a self-pin, but it's worth it. And he's got, what, a queen for a knight and a bishop and a pawn. So that leaves white in not bad shape. Plus his pieces are not developed. So again, this is a very comfortable position. Even if you're not a high elo player, this is a comfortable position for white to play. It's almost silly to even look at that line. Now there's another line where he gives away the queen, where he takes with the bishop at c3. And so he gets a rook and a minor piece for the queen. And now this kind of semi-traps the bishop, which attempts to get away right away. And then the unguarded piece is attacked along with b7 and f7. He relocates the piece so as not to lose it. And now we have some more threats. He goes back there to cover f7. Not quite an inspiring move. If you're the black pieces and you had to look at this position, do you still want to play the England Gambit? I should think not. Knight e4 threatens the bishop again. He goes back, and now we go to fianchetto the bishop. And as you can see, this is very nice for white. Even if you didn't know the advantage was that much, it's coming close to 2 pawns now. Okay, just to look at a few more moves that are not necessary to memorize, because you can already see that white has a very nice position here. So, and when you look at this, I mean, which color would you rather be? You know, let's look at it from black's perspective. I mean, you really want to be black pieces here? So, I would think not. Okay, so going back to before this, this is like the queen e7 line, where I recommend that you play knight f3, and if he goes knight f6, you play g5. Okay, the other line, besides queen e7, is getting the knight out first, which probably shouldn't make any significant difference at all. because it immediately transposes. If you go here, now he can play d6, and that transposes into our main line, which we haven't looked at yet. So this is the other one, and this is the same thing. We go bishop to g5, and it's the same position. So let's look at d6 as a second move for black. In this one, I agree with Grandmaster Smirnov that this is actually more dangerous for white. But all you really need to know as white is don't take this pawn. Don't take it. Instead, play this move. Now, you could play e4 here. That wouldn't be a terrible move to make. You could go knight c3 immediately. But best is knight f3. Now, of course, if he takes this pawn, you trade queens and then take this pawn. We've transposed into a sideline of Paul Morphy's Opera House game. So, knight f3, knight c6. Some people may point out that they might want to play knight d7 so that they're ready to take this pawn and compel white to do something. Because, see, this way, if black were to take, he still has queen takes queen, and then he must unguard the e5 pawn with his knight or lose castling. So, from here, we get another piece out. This is the, or actually, yeah, bishop. Bishop f4. And we have that. And bishop g5 is certainly playable there. And now his top move is to do this. So as before, we'll come back and look at some other moves that he could do. Let's suppose he goes back to this queen e7. I always go back first to those situations where the greatest opportunity to transpose to something we've already seen. And here he's better to go here and capture the pawn with a new piece coming out. The queen is also looking at b2, so white can play this strange looking move. Kind of reminds me of a move in the Ulvested defense to the two knights. But if you don't know about that, don't worry. Ignore that comment. So bishop comes back, guards b2, and then he takes with his queen. But now, remember, black has sacrificed a pawn, so white just trades queens here. And what has he got for his pawn? It's like one tempo of development. I mean, black has two pieces out, white has one. So white can go here and free this bishop as well. He attacks it, you defend it. Black could try this. You know, he's trying to get in a cheapo here. But you wouldn't mind trading a bishop for a knight if your center becomes this good, because you are a pawn ahead. You've got a knight and a pawn against a bishop. Knight here, double attacking this, not a problem. The knight gets knocked away, and then you can trade so that you don't have to worry about this, because you should be able to get d4 in anyway after this move. It's not like he can play c5. So from here, just to remember what it looks like, takes f3 here, then takes the then we trade, and then he plays e4. Attack, defense, threatens a fork, defends against it, and now he salvages his tempo to go ahead and trade, at least get the bishop pair. This move doesn't really seem logical to me. I mean, a better move for black might be to just go ahead and castle. But then you can go here with this bishop. But this is already a position that if you're the white pieces and you look at this and you say, yeah, I wouldn't mind being in this position, you've already achieved your goal. And I don't think black was looking to do this. Now, there is a move there that looks tempting, and it's not really good. This. Is that not really good? Looks like a pawn fork. Well, rook here allows e5. And then white's going to castle. And although he doesn't win a piece, black gets some development out of it. However, black can just take immediately. You know, you can just take. And then if you take, then he does this. And with f6 coming after knight d7, he'll win material back. So that's why e5 is not really a good move. Okay, so going backwards here. This is where black played the queen e7 line, which we said was not necessarily his best. We think bishop g4 is his best. Here's another way that he could play. He could play bishop e6 here. And as you might expect, we've got something for that. e5 is already well enough guarded. But if he wants to take, we'll let him trade queens because you take back with the rook. And that's to move his queen somewhere. So now we'll go ahead and do this because we can castle on the other side. That stops the knight from being pinned. And this is about as nicely as black could be expected to do here. It's like 0.7. That's the best he can do after bishop e6. So now we'll look at the main move here. So just to reorient ourselves, let's see where we're at. This is after black plays his main line. After you take his pawn, he plays d6. You bring your knight out. And then he goes here. You bring this out. And the pawn taking is very close to this, but it's just a good policy when someone's anxious to play a gambit. You want to be the one with the development. So that's why we'll go with the bishop move. And bishop g4 was his main line here. Okay, so you take. He comes out with the queen. Now there is this other variation where he goes here, and then you just go ahead and do like this. And if he doesn't want to trade queens, he has to mess up his pawns, because if he trades queens, then you happily exchange, and then you can just go here. And it's not like this trade here over here is going to hurt white. Remember, white's a pawn ahead, and he has no isolated pawns. If he goes there, he'll have an isolated h-pawn. Big deal. He can castle queenside and put his rook right on this weak pawn. So that's why I wouldn't recommend queen takes d6, which is also why I wouldn't recommend bishop takes d6 for black. This queen f6 move that we just saw is better for black. You know, attacks in both. He's got a, you know, this is where he moves his bishop all the way back. or goes here. Now let's look at the move that you're probably most worried about here if he goes here, because we can't play queen d4. So the queen takes here, and then you go here. Now if he tries to go here, white has a good move for that. He can just go, he can move his rook here. Castle's long, we take here. He moves the rook up, keeping the d2 knight pinned. Queen's got to move. Now on knight c3, obviously that just loses a piece because white takes the queen, black takes the queen, and then white takes the whole knight. So he's better off to do this, and then white saves this. Yeah, if he does this, you take with the queen, because moving the knight with the idea that the queen and rook will both attack this knight, which is now pinned. However, if the knight takes e3, you take back with your queen, and then the queen also guards it. Or wait a minute. Yeah, you go rook c1 here. Actually, if black were to go here, queen takes e3 is not good because of rook e7 pinning the queen. But instead, he might like to do this checkmate. That might be better. Yes. Okay. Okay, so I mean that's probably the move that a lot of people are worried about here is the queen takes b2. Let's go back further. And so what you want to remember is when he plays d6 here, your move is knight f3, and then if he goes knight c6, you can play bishop f4. If he goes with the queen and the knight, like most trappers try to do after you take here, if he makes either one of those moves, they almost always transpose into one another after knight f3, 7. And now, instead of bishop f4, which is certainly playable, I recommend bishop g5, just because these trappers were looking to attack the bishop and put you in check at the same time. 5, if the queen does the check, and actually queen e6 is better for black here. Then you do the tried and true knight. But if he does the check, again, knight c3 takes, and then you guard the knight. If he tries to double attack, then we attack the queen. And we saw how queen takes knight or bishop takes knight were just not good enough for black here and here. Queen's got to go back. And on this move, bishop taking the pawn was a disaster. All he can do really is take the knight. That's his best choice. And then you take back. And then his queen gets into some real danger. So, if he doesn't do the check and does what we would call the main line here, and plays queen e6, now you just come up. And if he wants to take here, again, you just go knight c3. Don't try to trade pieces with black by wasting tempos. Let him be forced to trade. Black can play d6 here. And again, this is getting to a position that we might recognize. Almost any time you're not sure what to do, especially with this knight, it almost always comes to c3. He takes, and then knight d5, threatening this fork again. That's always a theme, threatening that fork. So, when your opponent plays the England Gambit, you could turn it into a Danish Gambit or a center game. You could turn it into a French defense or a Caro-Kann, where you're a tempo up. But technically best is to just go ahead and take it. And now queen e7 and knight c6 turn out to be basically the same thing. d6 is his best chance, but as long as you don't take the pawn with your pawn, you're good. So you're going to move your knight out here. e4 here was also playable, and then when he goes here, bishop f4. So this is not so much to remember. If he does this, takes, and his best line is queen f6. And you could do this. Now here, if he does the capture of the b pawn, no need to panic. You take, and if he wants to take here, you ruin his pawns, chases queen. Some people want to know, what if he takes that pawn? But we'll come back to that. This could happen. Naturally, we gotta keep this line blocked and double guard this rook. Queen here, rook takes here. Here you might wonder, well, what if he were to take this pawn? Then you go here. And what is the deal with that? Why is that dangerous? Well, he's about to play rook a3, and the queen will have absolutely no safe square to go to. If he wants to avoid that, he could go here now. And now do you see white's killer move? Of course, knight takes d6 check will win the queen next. So you should have no trouble winning that on your own. So the next time somebody wants to play the England Gambit against you, you should act a little bit surprised and startled. Play right into their psychology, and even though you know what to play, act as if you're a little bit tortured over it, and you'll be likely to pull them into a false sense of security, but maybe only once. Good luck with this, D4 players. And if you're playing the England Gambit, I suggest that you watch my video on how to play the Cambridge Springs defense as black. It's a much better opening, it's fully sound, and it has some traps that white could fall into with very reasonable looking moves. Be sure to subscribe and to get your notifications. Give me a like on this. If you get a chance, visit HollywoodChessTutoring.com, and then after this you might want to watch every England Gambit video you can with this knowledge in mind first. Okay, thanks for watching.